Put on the uniform or get out of my house. 3 days after burying her mother, she stands frozen in her husband's office. The black server's outfit hangs between them like a death sentence for their marriage. Your mother is dead and my investors don't care. He tosses her wedding ring onto the uniform. Tonight you serve drinks or lose everything. Fresh soil still clings to her shoes from standing at her mother's grave this morning. The guests arriving downstairs once toasted their wedding with genuine smiles. Now they'll watch her carry trays while her billionaire husband pretends she's just another hired servant. Why, she whispers, clutching her mother's locket. Why would you humiliate me like this? His cold smile doesn't reach his eyes as he slides a document across his desk. Her mother's name appears beside the words, inheritance confirmed, and a number with too many zeros. She realizes with sickening clarity that her grief was never part of his equation. Their whirlwind romance, the fairy tale wedding, his insistence on caring for her dying mother personally. Every tender moment designed to secure a fortune she never knew existed. What would you do if the person who vowed to love you forever revealed their true intentions at your weakest moment? Would you walk away with nothing but your dignity, or play along until you discovered why your mother's death seemed to matter more than your marriage? Have you ever had that moment when everything you believed about your life shatters in an instant? When the person you trusted most reveals a face you've never seen before? This is the story of Ariel Thorne, a woman who discovered the true price of marrying into wealth and power at the moment she was most vulnerable. The uniform felt heavy in Ariel's hands, the fabric expensive but somehow suffocating. Black polyester blend with crisp white piping, sized perfectly for her slender frame. Her husband had prepared for this moment. Planned for it, down to the last detail. The realization made her stomach churn. I don't understand, Kieran. Ariel's voice sounded small even to her own ears. Why would you want your wife to serve drinks at your business party? Kieran Thorne, billionaire founder of Thorne Quantum Technologies, adjusted his custom-tailored jacket without meeting her eyes. At 42, he possessed the cold, refined handsomeness that graced the covers of business magazines, salt and pepper temples framing calculated gray eyes that had once looked at her with what she believed was love. The regular service staff is understaffed tonight. His tone suggested he was discussing something as trivial as a change in dinner plans. This is an important evening for the company. The Nakamura investors are flying in specifically for this event. I just buried my mother. The words felt like glass in her throat. 3 days ago, Kieran. I haven't even. Yes, and I've given you 3 days to grieve. He checked his watch, a timepiece worth more than what she used to make in a year as a hospice nurse. Life continues, Ariel. Business continues. Ariel stared at the man she had married 11 months ago, searching for any trace of the person who had swept her off her feet with grand romantic gestures and promises of forever. The Kieran who had proposed beneath a canopy of stars on his private yacht, who had written her poetry during their courtship, who had seemed so caring, so different from the cold-blooded business titan others described. These people know me as your wife. She tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. The Jacobsons were at our wedding. Senator Mitchell gave a toast. And tonight they'll see you in a different role. Kieran finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. Consider it a test of loyalty. Loyalty? Ariel felt something crack inside her chest. I've been by your side through everything. I left my career for you. I've been the perfect corporate wife. And while my mother was dying. While your mother was dying, Kieran interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp, I paid for the best medical care available. I arranged for home hospice services. I gave you unlimited access to the jet to visit her whenever you wished. I've been more than accommodating. The words hit Ariel like physical blows. As if her mother's illness had been an inconvenience to him. As if his financial support somehow entitled him to her dignity. You didn't even come to the funeral. The accusation tumbled out before she could stop it. A flicker of something, annoyance. Guilt. Crossed Kieran's face before the mask of indifference returned. I had meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. The Tokyo acquisition is at a critical stage. Ariel closed her eyes, remembering how she had stood alone at her mother's graveside. How she had made excuses to distant relatives about her husband's absence. How even her 19-year-old sister Mira had noticed and whispered, "Where's Kieran? Shouldn't he be here for you?" When she opened her eyes, Kieran had moved to the window overlooking the sprawling grounds of their Westchester estate. 12 acres of manicured perfection, gardens designed by landscape architects who had worked for European royalty, a life so far removed from the modest apartment she had shared with her mother growing up. The party begins in 1 hour. The staff entrance is through the kitchen. Raoul will show you what to do. His tone made it clear the discussion was over. And if I refuse? The question hung between them, dangerous and fragile. Kieran turned, his expression almost pitying. Then you can pack your personal belongings, just the items you brought into this marriage, of course, and leave. Your access to our accounts will be terminated immediately. As will the arrangement for your sister's university tuition. Mira. The final card he knew would break her resistance. Ariel's brilliant younger sister, halfway through her first year at Columbia on a partial scholarship, with Kieran covering the substantial remainder. Their mother's dying wish had been to see Mira graduate, become the doctor she'd dreamed of becoming since childhood. Ariel's fingers tightened around the uniform. You know I can't let Mira lose her education. A smile curved Kieran's lips, not reaching his eyes. Then I suggest you change quickly. The caterers are already setting up downstairs. As he moved past her toward the door, Ariel caught the scent of his cologne, the same exclusive blend he'd worn on their first date. Had everything been calculated from the beginning? Every smile, every touch, every promise. Why are you really doing this? She had to know, even as part of her dreaded the answer. Kieran paused at the doorway. Consider it a reminder of your place in this household. In this marriage. His gaze dropped to the document on his desk, the one with her mother's name circled in red ink. After all, circumstances have changed, haven't they? The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. Alone in his office, Ariel moved to the desk, her hands trembling as she reached for the document he had so deliberately left visible. It appeared to be some kind of financial report, but the header made no sense. Fontaine Legacy Holdings, Succession Confirmation. Her mother's maiden name had been Fontaine, but they had never been wealthy. Vivian Fontaine had worked as a high school literature teacher her entire career, raising 2 daughters alone after their father abandoned the family when Ariel was 10. The column of numbers beside her mother's name represented a sum so vast it seemed unreal. Billions, not millions. And the notation, transfer to surviving heir upon confirmation of V. Fontaine's death. Surviving heir. Ariel's knees weakened, forcing her to grab the edge of the desk. Had Kieran married her because of some inheritance she knew nothing about? Had he been waiting for her mother to die? The intercom on the desk buzzed sharply, making her jump. Mrs. Thorne. The voice belonged to Raoul, the house manager. Mr. Thorne asked me to remind you that the staff briefing begins in 15 minutes in the kitchen. Ariel stared at the black uniform in her hands. She could walk away right now. Leave with nothing but her dignity intact. But Myra's face flashed in her mind, her brilliant little sister who had overcome so much, who deserved her chance. I'll be there, she heard herself say, the words tasting like ash. As Ariel changed in the guest bathroom, not the master suite she shared with Kieran, her mind replayed the past 18 months in a new and terrible light. She had met Kieran Thorne while working as a hospice nurse for his father, Abram Thorne, the founder of what was then a modest technology company. Abram had been a kind man, nothing like the ruthless businessman his son would become. During the 3 months she cared for him, Ariel had seen Kieran transform from the distant son who visited out of obligation to a man reconnecting with his dying father, seemingly softened by the experience of loss. After Abram passed, Kieran had sought her out, ostensibly to thank her for making his father's final days comfortable. One coffee meeting had turned into dinner. Dinner into a weekend at his Hamptons house. His pursuit had been relentless but gentle, always respectful of her boundaries, always seeming genuinely captivated by her despite the vast differences in their worlds. "You see people," he had told her on their third date, his fingers interlaced with hers across a table at a restaurant so exclusive it had no name on the door. "Not their wealth or status or what they can do for you. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" She had believed him. Believed the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke about his lonely childhood, his distant parents, his struggle to connect with people who weren't trying to use him for his money. She had fallen in love with the man she thought was hiding beneath the billionaire exterior. When he proposed after 6 months, presenting her with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, the only woman in my family who knew what love really meant, he'd said, Ariel had said yes without hesitation, ignoring the warnings from colleagues about whirlwind romances with powerful men. Her mother had been more cautious. "He seems very intense, sweetheart," Vivian had said when Ariel brought Kieran to meet her. "Are you sure you know who he really is?" But even her mother had eventually been charmed by Kieran's attentiveness, his seemingly genuine interest in their family stories, his respect for Vivian's career as an educator. By the wedding, Vivian had embraced him as the son she never had, grateful that her daughter had found someone who appeared to truly cherish her. Now, slipping into the server's uniform that fit her perfectly, Ariel wondered how she could have been so blind. Had Kieran been investigating her family all along? Searching for some connection to the Fontaine fortune she'd never known existed? The black pants and fitted vest looked expensive but felt like a costume of humiliation. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, at the gold locket around her neck containing a small photo of her mother. Vivian had pressed it into her hand during their last lucid conversation. "This was your grandmother's," her mother had whispered, her voice weakened by the cancer ravaging her body. "She made me promise it would pass to you. Never take it off, Ariel. It's more important than you know." Ariel touched the locket now, drawing strength from it as she slipped her feet into the black flats that had appeared alongside the uniform. Even her shoes had been planned. Nothing overlooked. The staff entrance to the kitchen felt foreign, though she had lived in this mansion for nearly a year. The enormous professional kitchen was bustling with unfamiliar caterers preparing elaborate hors d'oeuvres. Raoul, who normally treated her with deferential respect as the lady of the house, now regarded her with poorly concealed discomfort. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, his Spanish accent more pronounced than usual. "This way, please." He led her to a corner where 5 other servers in identical uniforms were receiving instructions from a severe-looking woman with a clipboard. "This is Helene, the event coordinator," Raoul said before quickly retreating, unable to meet Ariel's eyes. Helene paused mid-sentence, her professional demeanor slipping for just a moment as she recognized Ariel. "Mrs. Thorne. I wasn't expecting you to actually." "Please," Ariel said quietly. "Just tell me what I need to do." Recovering quickly, Helene assigned Ariel to circulate with champagne trays for the first hour, then switched to past canapés. "Stay visible in the main reception rooms." Mr. Thorne was very specific about that. Of course he was, Ariel thought bitterly. Maximum visibility for her humiliation. As she practiced balancing the heavy silver tray, the kitchen door swung open and a tall, elegantly dressed man entered. Lucien Blackwood, Kieran's business partner and oldest friend, paused when he spotted Ariel, his usual composure faltering. "Ariel." Lucien approached slowly, as if not trusting his eyes. At 45, he moved with the liquid grace of a man completely at ease in his body and his power. "What are you doing dressed as waitstaff?" "Apparently fulfilling my wifely duties," she replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Kieran needed extra hands tonight." Lucien's dark eyes narrowed, his angular face hardening in a way she'd never seen before. 3 days after your mother's funeral. The simple acknowledgement of her loss, something Kieran had dismissed so coldly, nearly broke her composure. You remember? Of course I remember. I sent flowers. Lucien glanced around the kitchen, then lowered his voice. Ariel, what's really going on here? This isn't normal, even for Kieran. Before she could respond, the kitchen door swung open again and Kieran entered, now fully dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost more than a car. He stopped when he saw Lucien and Ariel together, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. Lucien. You're early. Kieran's tone was pleasant but held a warning. I wanted to review some points before the Nakamura team arrives. Lucien's voice had returned to its usual smooth cadence, but his eyes remained troubled. I didn't realize Ariel would be helping with service tonight. Last-minute staffing issue, Kieran said dismissively. Nothing to concern yourself with. The look that passed between the two men contained volumes of unspoken communication, histories, and secrets Ariel wasn't privy to. She had always sensed a complexity to their relationship that went beyond business partnership. Lucien was the only person who seemed immune to Kieran's authority, the only one who challenged him openly. If you'll excuse us, Kieran continued, I need a moment with my wife. Lucien hesitated, then nodded to Ariel. We'll speak later, he said, the words carrying a weight she couldn't quite interpret. When they were alone, or as alone as one could be in a kitchen full of busy caterers, Kieran moved closer to Ariel, his voice low. I see you made the right decision. For Myra's sake, she replied. Not yours. The motivation is irrelevant. The obedience is what matters. Ariel felt a chill at his words. What happened to you, Kieran? The man I married wouldn't do this. Something flickered in his gray eyes, regret. Doubt. Before hardening again. The man you married was a creation designed to get what I wanted. As were you, in your way. What does that mean? Kieran reached out, his fingers brushing against the gold locket at her throat. Ariel flinched away from his touch. Your mother never told you about your grandmother, did she? About the real Fontaine legacy? Ariel's heart pounded. My grandmother died before I was born. She was a French immigrant who married a struggling artist. There was no legacy. A cold smile curved Kieran's lips. Is that the story Vivian told you? How convenient for her. Don't you dare speak about my mother that way. Anger flared, momentarily overwhelming her fear. Not when you couldn't even be bothered to attend her funeral. I had more important matters to attend to that day. Kieran straightened his already perfect cuffs. Securing what should have been mine decades ago. Before Ariel could demand an explanation, Helene approached with nervous deference. Excuse me, Mr. Thorne. The first guests are arriving. Perfect timing. Kieran's public mask slipped back into place, the charming host replacing the cold-eyed stranger who had been threatening her moments before. Ariel will be right out with the champagne. As he turned to leave, he added quietly, remember our agreement. Perform your duties perfectly tonight, and Myra's education remains secure. Make a scene, and you both leave with nothing. Ariel watched him go, the elegant predator returning to his natural habitat of wealth and power. The champagne tray trembled slightly in her hands as she steadied herself. Are you all right, Mrs. Thorne? Helene asked, genuine concern breaking through her professional demeanor. No, Ariel wanted to scream. I'm being blackmailed by my husband days after burying my mother. I've discovered my entire marriage might be a lie. Nothing is all right. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted the heavy tray. I'm fine. Just tell me where to stand. The grand foyer of Thorne Manor was transformed for the evening's event. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, their light catching on priceless art and antiques collected from around the world. Fresh flowers in tasteful arrangements perfumed the air, their scent mingling with expensive perfumes and colognes as New York's elite filtered through the doors. Ariel stood near the entrance, offering champagne with a fixed smile that felt like it might shatter her face. The first guests barely noticed her, taking glasses without a glance at the server's face. But inevitably, recognition came. Ariel. Rebecca Jacobson, wife of hedge fund manager William Jacobson, stopped mid-sip, her perfectly maintained features creasing in confusion. "What on earth are you doing serving drinks at your own party?" Ariel had rehearsed her response during those agonizing minutes in the kitchen. "Just helping out with a staffing shortage. You know how these events can be." Rebecca's eyes narrowed, not believing the explanation for a second. "But surely Kieran could have hired." "Rebecca. There you are." Kieran materialized beside them, smoothly inserting himself into the conversation. "I see you found the champagne. Excellent. William was looking for you by the East Terrace." His hand pressed against the small of Ariel's back, a gesture that might appear affectionate to onlookers but felt like a brand of ownership. "Circulate, darling," he murmured near her ear. "Don't linger too long with any one guest." The evening proceeded like a slow-motion nightmare. Ariel moved through rooms that had once represented her fairy tale life, now feeling like an intruder in her own home. Some guests registered shock upon recognizing her, others pretended not to notice, and a disturbing few seemed to find amusement in her reduced status. "Always knew she wasn't really one of us," she overheard one woman whisper to another behind a manicured hand. "Nurses don't become socialites overnight without arrangements." Through it all, Ariel maintained her composure, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Each humiliating moment clarified her resolve. She would get through this night, protect Myra's future, and then discover what game Kieran was really playing. After an hour that felt like an eternity, she retreated to the kitchen to switch from champagne to hors d'oeuvres. Her feet ached in the too tight shoes, and her cheeks hurt from maintaining her false smile. "You're doing well," came a voice from the corner. Ariel turned to find Lucien leaning against the wall, his dark eyes assessing her with that same troubled expression from earlier. "Is that a compliment?" she asked, gratefully accepting the glass of water a kitchen assistant offered her. "An observation." Lucien moved closer, lowering his voice. "Most women would have thrown the champagne in his face by now. Most women don't have a sister depending on them." Lucien nodded slowly. "Kieran always finds the pressure point, doesn't he? The thing someone cares about more than their pride." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Something haunted flashed across his features. "Let's just say I recognize his methods." Before she could press further, the kitchen door swung open and a striking woman in a crimson gown entered. Valencia Reed, tech journalist and, if rumors were to be believed, Kieran's former fiancée before Ariel entered the picture. Valencia stopped when she saw Ariel, genuine shock registering on her face. "What the hell?" She looked from Ariel to Lucien, then back again. "Someone want to explain why Kieran has his wife serving canapés at his power broker party?" "It's complicated," Lucien began. "It's sick is what it is," Valencia cut him off, approaching Ariel with unexpected concern. "Especially after I heard about your mother. I'm very sorry." The simple kindness from this woman, essentially a stranger, and one who might have reason to resent her, threatened to crack Ariel's carefully maintained facade. "Thank you," she managed, blinking back unexpected tears. Valencia's expression hardened. "This has gone too far, Lucien. Even for him." "I'm handling it," Lucien replied, tension evident in his usually smooth voice. "Like you handled the Singapore situation?" Valencia challenged. Lucien's expression turned warning. "Not now, Val." A charged silence fell between them, breaking only when Helene entered to hurry Ariel back to the party with her tray of delicacies. As she made her way through the increasingly crowded reception rooms, Ariel's mind raced with questions. What was the Singapore situation? Why did Valencia seem so concerned about her welfare? And most importantly, what did Kieran mean about her grandmother and the real Fontaine legacy? Her mother had spoken little about her own parents. Vivian had been raised primarily by her father after her mother's death in childbirth. According to the few stories Ariel had heard, her grandfather had been a struggling artist who emigrated from France, and her grandmother had been a gentle soul who died too young. There had never been any mention of wealth or legacy or anything that would explain the document on Kieran's desk. As the evening progressed, Ariel noticed Kieran engaged in intense conversation with a group of Japanese businessmen, presumably the Nakamura investors. They stood in the library, the only room in the house where Kieran forbade staff to enter during business discussions. But the door had been left slightly ajar, and as Ariel passed with her tray, she caught fragments of conversation that made her pause. Confirmation came through yesterday, Kieran was saying. Fontaine Holdings has been officially transferred. The old woman's death was the final hurdle. And there will be no challenges to your control, asked an accented voice. None. Kieran's tone held absolute confidence. The only other potential claimant has no idea what she's entitled to. By the time she might discover it, the merger will be complete and the assets fully integrated into Thorn Quantum. Your wife, another voice interjected. She is this claimant. Technically. Kieran's laugh held no warmth. But a wife's assets legally become her husband's in the right jurisdictions with the right contracts. The marriage ensures my claim is ironclad. Ariel nearly dropped her tray, her hands suddenly numb with shock. The marriage ensures my claim. The words echoed in her head, confirming her worst suspicions. Kieran hadn't married her for love or even for the usual reasons powerful men took younger wives. He'd married her for some inheritance she knew nothing about, something connected to her mother, to the Fontaine name. Careful there, came a quiet voice beside her. Ariel startled to find Valencia at her elbow, steadying the tray of canapés that had begun to tilt dangerously. You shouldn't linger near the library during business talks, Valencia murmured, guiding her away from the door. Especially not tonight. You know what's happening, don't you? Ariel whispered back, allowing herself to be steered toward a less crowded corner of the hallway. Valencia's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. I know Kieran never does anything without multiple motives. And I know that party has nothing to do with the Nakamura investors and everything to do with celebrating his acquisition of something he's wanted for a very long time. The Fontaine legacy. What is it? Why would he marry me to get it? Valencia glanced around, then leaned closer. Not here. Too many eyes, too many ears. But find me later. After the party. Before Ariel could press for more information, Kieran emerged from the library, his gaze immediately finding her standing with Valencia. His expression darkened as he excused himself from his investors and moved toward them with predatory grace. Valencia, he greeted, his voice pleasant but his eyes cold. I wasn't aware you were on the guest list tonight. Lucien invited me, she replied smoothly. You know how he values having press connections at these events. Good for the company image. Indeed. Kieran's attention shifted to Ariel. I believe you're meant to be circulating with those hors d'oeuvres, not chatting with the guests. The pointed reminder of her role stung, but Ariel maintained her composure. Of course. Excuse me. As she moved away, she heard Valencia say to Kieran, really, darling? Making your grieving wife serve drinks? Even for you, that's exceptionally cruel. Kieran's response was too low to hear, but the tension between them was palpable. Clearly, there was history there beyond a simple broken engagement. For the next hour, Ariel performed her duties mechanically, her mind whirling with fragments of overheard conversations and half-formed theories. The Fontaine legacy. Her grandmother. A fortune that somehow belonged to her but that Kieran had claimed through their marriage. The pieces refused to form a coherent picture, like a puzzle with crucial parts missing. Her mother had never been wealthy. They had lived modestly, sometimes struggling to make ends meet after her father left. How could there be some vast Fontaine fortune that Kieran was now claiming? As the party reached its peak, with over 100 guests filling the main floor of the mansion, Ariel found herself directed to the east wing with fresh champagne. This section of the house contained Kieran's private art collection and was rarely used for entertaining. The hallway was quieter here, the sounds of the party fading as she moved deeper into the wing. She had just turned a corner when she noticed something odd. The door to what had once been a small sitting room was now fitted with a new, heavy-looking lock. In the 11 months she had lived in this house, Ariel had never seen that room locked. Curious, she moved closer, balancing her tray carefully as she examined the sophisticated electronic keypad beside the door. "That's new, isn't it?" came a voice from behind her. Ariel spun around to find Lucien watching her, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway lighting. "The lock," he clarified. "It wasn't there last week." "No," Ariel confirmed, her suspicion growing. "What's in that room now that needs such security?" Lucien's expression remained carefully neutral. "I believe Kieran mentioned acquiring some new pieces for his collection. Quite valuable, apparently. Valuable enough to justify a biometric lock." A slight smile curved Lucien's lips. "You notice more than you let on, don't you?" Ariel set down her tray on a nearby console table, abandoning the pretense of the dutiful server. "What I notice is that my husband is using my mother's death and my sister's future to manipulate me. What I notice is that he seems to have married me for access to some inheritance I know nothing about. What I notice, Lucien, is that everyone at this party seems to understand what's happening except me." Lucien studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "You're right about one thing, Kieran never wanted a wife. He wanted a legal connection to the Fontaine bloodline. But why? What does that name mean?" "It means billions in pharmaceutical patents, real estate holdings, and industrial investments," Lucien said quietly. "It means the missing piece that would make Thorn Quantum not just successful but globally dominant. And it means the fulfillment of a vendetta that started long before either of us entered Kieran's life." Ariel felt as though the floor were tilting beneath her feet. "That's not possible. My mother was a teacher. We struggled for money my entire childhood." "Your mother chose that life," Lucien replied. "She walked away from her birthright, changed her name, hid herself and her daughters from a world she wanted no part of. But the Fontaine fortune remained, held in trust, waiting for the legitimate heir to claim it upon Vivian's death. Which would be me." The realization felt surreal, impossible. "You or your sister. But Kieran calculated that you would be easier to acquire." The clinical term made Ariel's skin crawl. "So he pursued me, married me, all to gain control of this fortune. Control is everything to Kieran. It always has been." Lucien's voice held a note of what might have been regret. "But he miscalculated this time. He didn't expect you to be so observant, so resilient. And he certainly didn't expect Vivian to give you that locket before she died." Ariel's hand flew to the gold pendant at her throat. "My locket? What does this have to do with anything?" Before Lucien could answer, a sharp voice cut through the dim hallway. "There you are." Kieran approached, his expression thunderous despite his controlled tone. "Our guests are wondering where tonight's champagne has gone. I was just directing Mrs. Thorn back to the main party," Lucien said smoothly, all trace of their intimate conversation vanishing behind his usual polished veneer. "How considerate of you." Kieran's gaze flicked between them, calculating, assessing. "Though I'm sure my wife doesn't need an escort to perform such simple duties." The emphasis on "my wife" wasn't subtle. It was a reminder of ownership, of control. "Of course," Lucien inclined his head slightly. "I should return to our investors." As Lucien departed, Kieran turned his full attention to Ariel, his grey eyes cold with barely suppressed fury. "What did he tell you?" Nothing I hadn't already begun to suspect, Ariel replied, finding strength in the truth she was piecing together. That you married me for access to some Fontaine fortune. That my mother was more than she claimed to be. Kieran stepped closer, his height allowing him to loom over her. You understand nothing of what's at stake. Then explain it to me. Ariel lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated despite the fear coursing through her. Tell me why you're doing this. Why the charade of a loving marriage? Why force me to serve at your party days after my mother's funeral? What kind of man does that? The kind who gets what he wants. Kieran's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. The kind who ensures that what was stolen from his family is finally returned. Stolen? What are you talking about? Your precious grandmother, Kieran spat the word, was a thief and a liar. She stole proprietary research from my grandfather, research that built the Fontaine pharmaceutical empire while the Thorns were left with nothing. Ariel shook her head, disbelieving. That can't be true. My grandmother died giving birth to my mother. Is that the story Vivian told you? Kieran's laugh held no humor. Your grandmother faked her death, changed her identity, and disappeared with research that rightfully belonged to the Thorn family. She built an empire from stolen intellectual property, then hid her only daughter away when she realized my family was getting close to discovering the truth. The hallway seemed to spin around Ariel as she struggled to process this information. Could it be true? Had her entire family history been a fabrication? Even if what you're saying is true, she managed, that doesn't justify what you're doing now. Doesn't it? Kieran's expression turned calculating. An eye for an eye. Your grandmother stole from my family, destroyed my grandfather. I simply married into yours to reclaim what was always rightfully ours. Perfectly balanced, wouldn't you say? The coldness in his voice sent a chill through Ariel. This wasn't just business to Kieran. This was personal, generational, a vendetta nursed through decades. And tonight, she asked. This humiliation. Was that part of your grand justice? Tonight is a test. Kieran straightened his already immaculate tie. To see how far you're willing to go to protect what matters to you. Just as I've gone to extraordinary lengths to protect what matters to me. Mira, Ariel whispered, understanding dawning. You're using her as leverage to keep me in line while you, what? Transfer this fortune I never knew about. Smart girl. Kieran's smile was all predator now, the mask of civility completely discarded. The transfers require certain signatures, certain appearances of a harmonious marriage. Once those are complete, our arrangement can be renegotiated. The clinical way he discussed their marriage made Ariel's stomach turn. And if I refuse to cooperate? If I fight this? Then little Mira loses everything, her education, her future prospects, perhaps even more. His implication was clear. And you'll find yourself with nothing. No home, no resources, no credibility. Who would believe you? The gold-digging nurse who married a billionaire, then tried to claim she knew nothing about money when the marriage soured. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Kieran had constructed a scenario where Ariel had everything to lose and nothing to gain by fighting him. Or so he thought. You should return to your duties, Kieran said, his public persona sliding back into place as footsteps approached from the main hallway. Our Japanese friends are waiting for a toast to our new partnership. As Ariel picked up her abandoned champagne tray, a new resolve hardened within her. Kieran believed he held all the cards, that she would submit to protect Mira. What he didn't realize was that in his arrogance, he had revealed too much. She now knew what he wanted. She knew why he wanted it. And most importantly, she knew that somehow, the simple gold locket around her neck, the one her mother had insisted she never remove, was significant enough to make Lucien Blackwood, Kieran's most trusted ally, hint at rebellion. Of course, husband, she said, her tone perfectly subservient as she followed him back toward the party. Whatever you say. But in her mind, Ariel was already planning. She would play the obedient wife tonight, perform the role Kieran had scripted for her. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she would begin to unravel the true Fontaine legacy, and discover exactly what power she held that made Kieran Thorne so desperate to control her. Have you ever discovered that the person closest to you has been hiding devastating secrets? Would you play along to uncover the truth, or walk away immediately? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The remainder of the party passed in a blur of silver trays and forced smiles. Ariel moved through the crowded rooms like a ghost in someone else's life, mechanically offering champagne and canapés while her mind raced. She catalogued each snippet of overheard conversation, each strange glance from guests who recognized her, each moment when Kieran's mask of civility slipped to reveal the coldness beneath. By midnight, when the last guests finally departed, her feet throbbed in the too tight shoes and her back ached from hours of carrying heavy trays. But the physical discomfort paled compared to the emotional toll of the evening. The humiliation. The betrayal. The sickening realization that her entire marriage had been built on calculation rather than love. "You performed adequately," Kieran said as they stood in the foyer, his tone suggesting he was evaluating an employee rather than addressing his wife. The catering staff bustled around them, clearing glasses and dismantling serving stations. The Nakamura investors were impressed with the event. "I'm so pleased they enjoyed watching your wife serve drinks," Ariel replied, too exhausted to mask her bitterness. Kieran's eyes narrowed. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we have the documentation for the Fontaine transfer to finalize. I'll need your signature on several forms. And if I refuse to sign?" "We've already discussed the consequences." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Besides, it's merely a formality. The prenuptial agreement you so trustingly signed gives me legal authority to act on your behalf in financial matters." Ariel felt cold dread seeping through her exhaustion. She remembered the prenuptial agreement, a thick document she'd reviewed with the attorney Kieran had recommended. At the time, she'd believed his explanation that it was standard protection for someone of his wealth. Now she wondered what clauses had been hidden in the dense legal language, what rights she'd unwittingly signed away. "I'd like to see these documents before I sign anything," she said, striving to keep her voice steady. "Of course." His tone was indulgent, patronizing. "Though I doubt you'll understand the complex legal and financial structures involved. The Fontaine holdings are extraordinarily complicated, deliberately so. Your grandmother was quite paranoid about protecting her stolen assets." "Stop saying she stole anything." Ariel's temper flared despite her fatigue. "You've given me no proof, only accusations. The proof is in that room you were so curiously examining earlier." Kieran's gaze sharpened. "A room you have no business approaching again. Am I clear?" Before she could respond, Helene approached with a clipboard. "Excuse me, Mr. Thorne. The catering staff needs final approval before departing." "Of course." Kieran turned away dismissively. "I'll be in my study until late, Ariel. Don't wait up." Left alone in the foyer, Ariel felt the weight of the day crushing down on her. 3 days ago, she had buried her mother. Tonight, she had buried her marriage. Tomorrow, if Kieran had his way, she would help bury whatever legacy her family might have left her. "You look dead on your feet." Ariel turned to find Valencia Reed leaning against the grand staircase, her crimson gown a splash of vivid color against the muted elegance of the foyer. "I thought you'd left," Ariel said, surprised. "I stayed behind. Told Kieran I needed to use the ladies' room." Valencia glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "You wanted answers." "I have some, but not here. Can you meet me tomorrow? I don't know if I can get away. Kieran mentioned documents to sign, and he'll be watching me carefully now." Valencia slipped a business card into Ariel's hand. "Text this number if you can meet. There's a cafe in Brooklyn where we won't be recognized." "And Ariel?" Her expression turned serious. Be careful with that locket. Don't let him get his hands on it. Before Ariel could ask what she meant, Valencia straightened as Lucien appeared from the direction of the library. Val, there you are. I was about to send out a search party. His eyes flicked to Ariel, then back to Valencia. Your car is waiting. Of course. Just saying goodnight to our hostess. Valencia squeezed Ariel's arm briefly, the gesture conveying solidarity, before allowing Lucien to escort her out. Alone at last, Ariel climbed the sweeping staircase to the second floor, her body moving on autopilot toward the master suite. Then she stopped, the thought of sharing a bed with Kieran suddenly unbearable. Instead, she turned toward one of the guest bedrooms, a room she'd decorated herself when they first moved in but that had never been used. The room felt safer somehow, neutral territory in a house that suddenly seemed filled with danger. She locked the door behind her, then collapsed onto the edge of the bed, still wearing the server's uniform. Her fingers found the locket at her throat, the metal warm against her skin. What secrets did this simple piece of jewelry hold that made it so important? Why had her mother insisted she never remove it? With trembling hands, she opened the clasp, expecting to see the small photograph of her mother that had always been there. But as the locket fell open, she noticed something she'd never seen before, a thin seam around the edge of the photo. Carefully, she worked her fingernail into the seam and lifted. The photo came away, revealing a tiny data chip embedded in the locket's hidden compartment. Ariel stared at the chip in disbelief. What information could be so valuable that her mother had hidden it this way? And how could she access it without Kieran discovering what she'd found? Sleep eluded her that night, her mind churning with questions and half-formed plans. By dawn, she had made her decision. She would play along with Kieran's scheme, pretending to cooperate while secretly investigating the truth about her family and the Fontaine legacy. And she would start by meeting with Valencia Reed, the woman who seemed to know more about her husband's machinations than she did. At breakfast, Kieran was already seated at the dining table when Ariel entered, his attention focused on his tablet. Without looking up, he gestured to the chair beside him. You slept in the blue guest room last night, he observed, his tone conversational but with an undercurrent of displeasure. I didn't want to disturb you coming in late, Ariel lied, pouring herself coffee from the silver pot on the table. Thoughtful. But unnecessary. Kieran finally looked up, his gray eyes assessing. You're my wife, Ariel. Your place is in our bedroom, regardless of any temporary disagreements. The possessiveness in his voice made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to nod acquiescence. Of course. It won't happen again. Good. He returned to his tablet, apparently satisfied with her submission. The documentation for the Fontaine transfer will be ready this afternoon. My attorney will be here at 2 to oversee the signing. I'd like to review everything first, Ariel said, careful to keep her tone neutral. And I was hoping to visit Mira today. She has a break between classes around noon. Kieran's eyes narrowed slightly. Your sister can wait. This cannot. It would only be for an hour. Ariel persisted, sensing an opportunity to meet Valencia without arousing suspicion. Columbia is just a short drive. I could be back well before your attorney arrives. After a calculated pause, Kieran nodded. Very well. Take the silver Bentley, not the Range Rover. And have Maurice drive you. I don't want you wandering the city alone. Maurice. Kieran's most trusted security man, whose real job seemed to be reporting back on Ariel's every movement. This complicated things. Of course, she agreed, her mind already searching for ways to evade her watchdog. I appreciate your concern for my safety. Kieran's smile was cold. It's not just your safety I'm concerned with, darling. It's the decisions you might make if left to your own devices. You're upset, emotional after your mother's passing. Not thinking clearly. The condescension in his voice sparked anger, but Ariel swallowed it down. Let him underestimate her. Let him believe she was too broken, too dependent to challenge him. It would make her eventual escape all the more effective. "You're right," she said, lowering her eyes submissively. "I'm not myself lately. I understand." His tone softened with false sympathy. "Which is why I'm handling everything. You don't need to worry about complicated financial matters or business decisions. Just sign the papers this afternoon, and all will be taken care of." After breakfast, Ariel retreated to her dressing room to prepare for her outing. She chose a conservative navy dress and pearl earrings, the perfect costume for a dutiful wife visiting her college-aged sister. As she applied her makeup, she texted Valencia from the burner phone she'd had the foresight to purchase months ago when Kieran first began monitoring her regular cell phone. "Noon at the cafe. Being followed by security. Need distraction." The response came almost immediately: "Handled. Follow instructions when you arrive." At 11:30, Maurice escorted Ariel to the waiting Bentley, his imposing presence a reminder of how closely she was being watched. The drive into Manhattan passed in tense silence, Maurice's eyes occasionally meeting hers in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Thorne said you're visiting your sister at Columbia," he finally asked as they approached the university. "Yes. Just a quick lunch between her classes." Ariel kept her expression pleasantly neutral. "You don't need to come in. I won't be long." Maurice's grimace suggested he had other instructions. "I'll wait in the car, Mrs. Thorne. But Mr. Thorne asked that I accompany you to meet your sister." "Of course he did," Ariel murmured, staring out the window at the students traversing the historic campus. Young people with futures stretching before them, uncomplicated by hidden fortunes and manipulative husbands. The car pulled up near the main campus gate, and Maurice hurried around to open her door. As Ariel stepped out, she spotted a familiar figure approaching, Valencia, dressed down in jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt, her signature crimson lipstick replaced with subtle gloss, her hair tucked under a baseball cap. "Excuse me," Valencia called out, her voice pitched differently than her usual confident tone. "Are you Ariel Thorne? Myra's sister?" Before Ariel could respond, Maurice stepped forward protectively. "Who's asking?" "I'm Professor Jenkins, Myra's faculty advisor." Valencia held out her hand to Maurice. "She asked me to meet you. She's been delayed at the lab but didn't have your number to let you know." Maurice frowned, clearly suspicious. "Mr. Thorne didn't mention a professor." "Well, I don't report my movements to Mr. Thorne," Valencia replied with convincing irritation. "I'm doing a favor for a promising student. Now, Mrs. Thorne, if you'll come with me. Mira should be finished in about 20 minutes. We can wait in my office." Maurice hesitated, torn between his instructions to stay with Ariel and the apparent legitimacy of the situation. "It's fine, Maurice," Ariel assured him. "Why don't you find parking? This is a secure campus. I'll be perfectly safe with Professor Jenkins." After another moment of indecision, Maurice nodded reluctantly. "I'll find you when you're ready to leave, Mrs. Thorne. Please don't go off campus." As soon as the Bentley pulled away, Valencia's posture changed, reverting to her usual confident stance. "Well, that worked better than expected. Come on, we don't have much time." She led Ariel through a series of winding paths to a small cafe tucked away on a side street just outside the campus boundaries. The cozy space was filled with students absorbed in laptops and textbooks, none paying attention to the two women who slipped into a corner booth. "Clever disguise," Ariel commented as Valencia removed her cap, releasing her signature dark waves. "I've had practice avoiding unwanted attention." Valencia ordered coffee for both of them before leaning forward, her expression serious. "Now, tell me what you know." Ariel recounted the events of the past 24 hours, Kieran's cruel demand that she serve at the party, the document she'd seen on his desk, the fragments of conversation she'd overheard, and finally, the discovery of the data chip hidden in her mother's locket. Valencia listened without interruption, her dark eyes narrowing at certain details. When Ariel finished, she sat back with a long exhale. "That bastard," she muttered. "I knew he was ruthless, but this exceeds even my expectations." "You were engaged to him," Ariel said, not a question but a statement. "Briefly. 5 years ago." Valencia's expression darkened. "Until I discovered what he was really after." "Which was?" "The same thing he wanted from you, access to Fontaine Pharmaceuticals." Valencia sipped her coffee, her eyes never leaving Ariel's face. "My maternal grandfather was on the Fontaine board of directors for 30 years. Kieran thought marriage to me would give him influence there. When he realized my grandfather had retired without maintaining significant voting power, the engagement ended rather abruptly. So this has been his obsession for years." "Decades," Valencia corrected. "The rivalry between the Thorne and Fontaine families goes back to the 1960s. Your grandmother, Elise Fontaine, and Kieran's grandfather, Richard Thorne, were research partners at MIT. They were developing breakthrough pharmaceutical compounds, revolutionary treatments for diseases that were considered incurable at the time. But my grandmother died giving birth to my mother," Ariel protested. "At least, that's what I was always told. That was the official story. The truth is more complicated." Valencia glanced at her watch. "We don't have much time before your watchdog comes looking, so I'll give you the condensed version. Elise Fontaine discovered that Richard Thorne was planning to weaponize their research for military contracts, creating chemical weapons disguised as medical breakthroughs. When she threatened to expose him, he tried to have her killed." Ariel felt as though the floor were tilting beneath her. That can't be true." "She escaped, but knew Richard would never stop hunting her. So she faked her death during childbirth, changed her identity, and disappeared with her newborn daughter, your mother. But before she vanished, she took their most important research with her and established Fontaine Pharmaceuticals under a board of trusted colleagues. The company developed legitimate medical applications for their discoveries, becoming one of the most successful pharmaceutical companies in the world. And my mother? She grew up knowing none of this. Elise raised Vivian with a new identity, protected from the truth until she was an adult. When Vivian finally learned who she really was, she wanted nothing to do with the fortune or the company. She chose a simple life as a teacher, away from the world of corporate power and family vendettas. But the fortune remained, Ariel said slowly, piecing together the story. "In trust somewhere." "Exactly. The Fontaine family assets are held in a complex trust structure, with ironclad provisions that the fortune passes to Vivian's heirs upon her death. Which means you and your sister. And Kieran knew this when he pursued me." The full scope of his deception made Ariel feel physically ill. "He researched my family background, discovered my connection to the Fontaine fortune, and targeted me specifically." "Yes. After his attempt with me failed, he must have traced the Fontaine lineage to your mother, and by extension, to you and Mira." "But why me and not Mira?" Valencia's expression turned grim. "Mira was too young, still legally a minor when your mother's illness began. You were the vulnerable one, emotionally drained from caring for your dying mother, financially stressed, and isolated. The perfect target. The calculated cruelty of it staggered Ariel. Not just a marriage of convenience or financial gain, but a meticulously planned deception spanning months, perhaps years." "What about Lucien?" she asked, remembering his cryptic warnings. "Where does he fit in all this?" "Lucien Blackwood is complicated." Valencia chose her words carefully. "His relationship with Kieran goes back to childhood. They grew up together, both grandsons of powerful men with shared history. But Lucien has his own agenda. I believe he initially supported Kieran's plan to acquire Fontaine, but something changed. He seems to have developed concerns about Kieran's methods. He tried to warn me last night. About the locket. That doesn't surprise me. Lucien has lines he won't cross, even for Kieran. Valencia leaned forward urgently. Speaking of the locket, we need to access that data chip. It could contain crucial information about the trust, perhaps even evidence of Richard Thorne's crimes that Elise preserved as insurance. How? I can't exactly walk into a tech store and ask them to read a mysterious chip I found in my locket. Leave that to me. I have contacts who can help. Valencia scribbled an address on a napkin. Can you get away tomorrow morning? Tell Kieran you're visiting your mother's grave or something equally plausible. He'll send Maurice again. We'll handle that. Valencia glanced toward the door. Speaking of which, your time is almost up. Let me call Mira, get her here to maintain our cover story. Mira? Ariel felt a surge of panic. No, I don't want her involved in this. It's too dangerous. She's already involved, Ariel. She's a Fontaineer too. And Kieran will use her against you as long as you let him. Before Ariel could argue further, Valencia was already dialing, her voice shifting back to Professor Jenkins, as she apparently reached Myra's voicemail. Mira, it's Professor Jenkins. I'm with your sister at the cafe near Hammond Hall. Please join us when you're finished in the lab. Hanging up, she turned back to Ariel. Your sister will be confused, but play along when she arrives. Tell her you'll explain everything later, in private. I can't drag her into this mess, Ariel protested. She's already in it. The only question is whether she'll be protected with knowledge or vulnerable in ignorance. Valencia's expression softened slightly. I understand wanting to shield her. But Kieran won't hesitate to use her against you. The best protection you can give her now is the truth. Before Ariel could respond, the cafe door opened and Maurice entered, scanning the room with obvious irritation. His gaze locked on Ariel, and his expression darkened as he approached their table. Mrs. Thorne, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I've been looking for you. This is not Professor Jenkins' office. My office was occupied, Valencia replied smoothly. Department meeting. We decided to wait for Mira here instead. And where is Mira? Maurice demanded. As if on cue, the door opened again and Ariel's sister entered, looking confused but composed. At 19, Mira was a younger, more studious version of Ariel, the same chestnut hair and delicate features, but with a serious intensity that had always marked her as the intellectual of the family. Ariel. Mira looked between her sister and Valencia with understandable confusion. What's going on? I got a strange voicemail from someone claiming to be Professor Jenkins. That would be me, Valencia extended her hand. I apologize for the confusion, Mira. Your sister wanted to surprise you with lunch, but there was a miscommunication about your schedule. Myra's intelligent eyes narrowed, clearly sensing the fabrication, but she played along admirably. Right. My lab ran late. Sorry to keep you waiting. The tension in the cafe was palpable as Maurice glowered at the three women. Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Thorne expects you back by 2 o'clock for your meeting with the attorneys. Of course. Ariel rose, embracing her sister with genuine emotion. I'm sorry our lunch was cut short, Mira. We'll catch up properly soon, I promise. Are you okay? Mira whispered, concern evident in her voice. You seem different. I'll explain everything soon, Ariel murmured back. Just be careful. Don't discuss me or my marriage with anyone, especially not on your phone or email. Myra's eyes widened at the warning, but she nodded almost imperceptibly. Call me. The secure number. The sisters had established a private communication system years ago, a vestige of their childhood games that now seemed prophetically useful. Ariel squeezed Myra's hand in acknowledgement before turning to Valencia. Thank you for your help, Professor Jenkins. It was most illuminating. Any time, Mrs. Thorne. Valencia's meaningful look conveyed the weight of unspoken plans. Remember what we discussed about your mother's memorial project? I think it would be a fitting tribute. The drive back to Westchester passed in tense silence. Morris's suspicious glances in the rearview mirror made it clear he would be reporting every detail of the unexpected cafe meeting to Kieran. Ariel used the time to prepare herself for the confrontation that would inevitably follow, and for the dangerous game of deception she would need to play during the attorney's visit. The mansion loomed ahead, no longer the dream home it had once seemed but a gilded prison. As the Bentley crunched up the gravel drive, Ariel spotted Kieran waiting on the front steps, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. "You're late," he said as Maurice opened her car door. "And I understand there was some confusion about your meeting with Mira." Professor Jenkins mixed up the schedule, Ariel replied, the lie coming easily now. "Mira was in a lab. We only had a few minutes together before Maurice insisted we return." Kieran's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, another car approached, a sleek black Mercedes that Ariel recognized as belonging to Gregory Winters, Kieran's personal attorney. "We'll discuss this later," Kieran said, his voice low and threatening. "For now, remember your role. Smile, sign what's put in front of you, and keep your questions to a minimum." "Of course, darling," Ariel replied, the endearment like acid on her tongue. "Whatever you say." The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed play. Gregory Winters, a silver-haired shark in an expensive suit, presented document after document for her signature. Kieran hovered nearby, his presence a constant reminder of the threats hanging over her head. "These are simply formalities, Mrs. Thorne," Winters explained with practiced smoothness. "Standard transfers of assets following your mother's passing. As your husband explained, the prenuptial agreement gives him authority to manage these assets on your behalf." "Of course," Ariel murmured, scanning each page before signing. She noted the names of holding companies, account numbers, and legal entities, committing them to memory while maintaining an outward appearance of board compliance. "It's all so complicated. I'm grateful Kieran understands these things." Her performance seemed to satisfy both men. As the signing concluded, Winters gathered the documents into his briefcase with evident satisfaction. "Excellent. The transfers will be processed immediately. Within 48 hours, the Fontaine assets will be fully integrated into the Thorne quantum structure." "And the board seats?" Kieran asked, his attention focused on Winters rather than Ariel. "Already arranged. The Nakamura representatives will take their positions next week, with you maintaining controlling interest, of course." "Perfect." Kieran's smile was all predator. "And the special items we discussed?" Winters glanced briefly at Ariel, then back to Kieran. "Secured as requested. The authentication process is underway." The cryptic exchange piqued Ariel's curiosity, but she maintained her facade of indifference. Whatever special items they were discussing, they clearly related to the locked room in the East Wing. After Winters departed, Kieran turned to Ariel, his expression calculating. "You played your part well. Perhaps too well." "I don't know what you mean." "Maurice tells me your meeting with Mira involved a woman claiming to be Professor Jenkins." A Professor Mira seemed not to recognize initially. Ariel felt a cold thread of fear, but kept her expression neutral. "There was some confusion, yes. End of semester, busy schedules. You know how academia can be." "Indeed." Kieran moved closer, invading her personal space in a way that made her skin crawl. "And this professor, what did you discuss with her while waiting for Mira?" "My mother, mostly." Ariel mixed truth with fiction, the most effective form of lying. She knew of Mom's work in education. "We talked about establishing a memorial scholarship in her name." Kieran studied her face, searching for deception. For a moment, Ariel feared he would press further, perhaps even reveal that he knew Valencia's true identity. But finally, he nodded, apparently satisfied. "A scholarship. How fitting." His tone suggested he found the idea trivial but acceptable. You should focus on such memorials now, rather than concerning yourself with business matters. The Fontaine transfer is complete. That chapter of your family history is closed. Not quite, Ariel thought, but she merely nodded in agreement. You're right, of course. I should concentrate on honoring my mother's memory. Exactly. Kieran's expression softened into something almost genuine. I know last night was difficult for you. The party, the demands I made. But it was necessary, Ariel. A test that you passed admirably. A test of what? Loyalty. Obedience. His hand reached up to stroke her cheek, the gesture possessive rather than affectionate. Qualities I value in a wife. Ariel forced herself not to recoil from his touch. And now that I've proven myself. Now we move forward. You as the perfect corporate wife, me as the head of what will soon be the most powerful technological and pharmaceutical conglomerate in the world. His smile turned cold. The perfect partnership. Is that what we have? A partnership? Of a kind. Kieran stepped back, businesslike again. I have calls to make. We'll dine together at 8. Wear the blue dress I bought you in Paris. As he walked away, Ariel felt a curious mixture of relief and dread. She had survived this encounter, maintained her deception. But the game was far from over. Tomorrow, she would meet Valencia again to access the data chip. And somehow, she needed to discover what was in that locked room before Kieran completed whatever plan he had set in motion. That evening, dressed in the requested blue gown, Ariel joined Kieran for dinner in the formal dining room. The vast mahogany table, set for two at one end, emphasized the empty space between them, a fitting metaphor for their marriage. You look lovely, Kieran observed as she took her seat, his appreciative gaze more clinical than passionate. That color suits you. Thank you. Ariel accepted a glass of wine from the hovering server, noting that the staff treated her with cautious deference, clearly uncertain of her status after the previous night's events. How was your afternoon? Productive. Kieran launched into a detailed description of merger plans and stock projections, speaking as though to a business associate rather than a spouse. The familiar monologue allowed Ariel's mind to wander, planning her movements for the following day. She would need to evade Maurice somehow, make it to the address Valencia had provided, and return before Kieran became suspicious. All while maintaining the pretense of the grieving but obedient wife. Are you listening, Ariel? Kieran's sharp question pulled her back to the present. Of course. The Nakamura investment creates a foothold in the Asian markets. He studied her for a moment, then continued his explanation of corporate strategy. Ariel nodded at appropriate intervals, asked the right questions, played her role perfectly. But her attention was divided, part of her mind focused on the locket resting against her skin beneath the elegant gown. What secrets did the hidden data chip contain? Would it provide the evidence she needed to understand her family's legacy, and perhaps to free herself from Kieran's control? After dinner, Kieran suggested they retire to the library for brandy, a routine that had once seemed romantic but now felt like another performance for an audience of two. I've been thinking, he said as they settled into leather armchairs before the ornate fireplace. We should take a vacation soon. Perhaps the villa in Antibes. You've always loved the Mediterranean. Ariel nearly choked on her brandy. A vacation? Now. In a few weeks, once the merger is finalized. Kieran swirled the amber liquid in his glass. You're under considerable stress after your mother's passing. A change of scenery would do you good. And remove me from New York, from Mira, from any support network I might have, Ariel thought. Aloud, she said, that's thoughtful of you. Though I'd hate to leave Mira alone too long. Your sister is hardly alone. She has her university friends, her studies. Kieran's tone was dismissive. Besides, she could visit us for a weekend if you insist. I'll consider it. Ariel knew a direct refusal would only arouse suspicion. Though I was hoping to establish that memorial scholarship for my mother first. Perhaps visit her grave again tomorrow morning. The funeral was such a blur. Kieran studied her over the rim of his glass. Maurice can drive you. I'd prefer to go alone, if you don't mind. She infused her voice with carefully calibrated vulnerability. It's a private moment. I need to say things to her that I couldn't express with others present. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. I understand. Take the Range Rover, though. The cemetery is in a questionable area. Thank you. The small victory felt enormous. I appreciate your understanding. I'm not a monster, Ariel, despite what you may currently think. Kieran's expression was unreadable. I simply pursue what I believe is rightfully mine. And what is that, exactly? What does the Fontaine legacy mean to you beyond money and power? Kieran was silent for a long moment, staring into the depths of his brandy. When he finally spoke, his voice held an intensity she rarely heard from him. Justice. Restoration. The recognition that my grandfather's work was stolen, his legacy erased by a woman who betrayed him professionally and personally. Elise Fontaine, Ariel said, testing the waters. My grandmother. Kieran's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. What do you know about her? Only what my mother told me. That she died giving birth, that she was French, married to an artist. Lies. The word emerged as a hiss. Your grandmother was brilliant but duplicitous. She seduced my grandfather, stole his research, and built an empire on his ideas while he died in obscurity, his reputation destroyed. And this justifies deceiving me? Marrying me under false pretenses? Ariel couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Using my sister as leverage to control me? The ends justify the means. Kieran set down his glass with deliberate precision. My grandfather's name will be restored. The Thorne legacy will finally take its rightful place in scientific and corporate history. And you, Ariel, will be generously compensated for your role in making it possible. Is that what our marriage is to you? A compensation package? Something flickered in Kieran's eyes, regret. Doubt, but vanished so quickly Ariel thought she might have imagined it. Our marriage is a means to an end that benefits us both. You'll have wealth, security, status. I'll have what was stolen from my family. A fair exchange. Except I never agreed to those terms. You presented yourself as something you weren't, a man who loved me. And you presented yourself as someone who could see beyond wealth and status to the person beneath. Kieran's smile was cold. We both played our parts convincingly. The casual cruelty of his dismissal stung more than Ariel expected. Despite everything she now knew about his deception, some small part of her had hoped that perhaps not everything had been a lie. That perhaps, somewhere beneath the calculation and ambition, there had been genuine feeling. I should go to bed, she said, unable to continue the conversation without revealing too much of her own emotions. Tomorrow will be difficult, visiting the cemetery. Of course. Kieran rose, ever the gentleman in superficial matters. Will you be joining me in our bedroom tonight? Or continuing your exile to the guest room? The question was loaded, a test of her commitment to their apparent reconciliation. Ariel knew the safest choice was to maintain the illusion of compliance, but the thought of sharing Kieran's bed made her physically ill. I need a little more time, she said, forcing her voice to sound apologetic rather than repulsed. The guest room just for tonight. For clarity. Kieran studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But don't make a habit of it. People will talk if they learn we're sleeping separately. Heaven forbid the staff gossip about our sleeping arrangements when you've already had me serving drinks at your business party, Ariel couldn't resist saying, immediately regretting the flash of temper. To her surprise, Kieran laughed, the sound genuinely amused. "There's the fire I've always admired in you. Good night, Ariel. Sleep well." Alone in the guest room, Ariel finally allowed herself to acknowledge the full weight of her situation. Her husband had married her for access to a fortune she hadn't known existed. Her mother had hidden her true identity for decades. Her grandmother had been a pharmaceutical pioneer who faked her own death to escape Kieran's grandfather. And somehow, the small data chip hidden in her locket connected it all. Tomorrow, she would begin unraveling the truth about the Fontaine legacy. But for now, she needed rest. The game she was playing required clear thinking and careful strategy. One misstep could cost her not just the inheritance she'd never known about, but potentially her freedom, and her sister's safety. As she drifted toward sleep, Ariel's fingers closed around the locket at her throat, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. "I'll discover the truth, Mom," she whispered into the darkness. "I promise." But even as she made this pledge, a part of her feared what truths might be revealed. If Kieran's version of events contained even a kernel of truth. If her grandmother had indeed stolen research that didn't belong to her, what did that mean for the fortune Ariel might inherit? And could she live with herself if her family's wealth had been built on deception? These questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where faceless figures chased her through endless corridors, always leading back to that locked room in the east wing of Thorn Manor. What secrets would you pursue even at great personal risk? How far would you go to uncover the truth about your own family history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Dawn broke over the Westchester estate, pale light filtering through the guest room curtains as Ariel prepared for the day ahead. She dressed carefully, choosing clothing appropriate for a cemetery visit, a simple black dress, understated jewelry, modest heels. The perfect costume for her deception. The locket hung heavy against her skin, its hidden contents potentially the key to her freedom. She tucked it safely beneath her dress, then made her way downstairs where Kieran was already at the breakfast table, absorbed in his morning financial briefings. "You're up early," he observed without looking up from his tablet. "Eager to visit the cemetery?" "I want to arrive before it gets crowded," Ariel replied, helping herself to coffee. "Some things are easier to say in privacy." Kieran glanced up, studying her with those calculating gray eyes. "Take as much time as you need. Though I would appreciate if you were back by noon. The Nakamura representatives are coming for lunch." "Of course." Ariel sipped her coffee, maintaining the perfect balance between grief and compliance. "I wouldn't want to miss that." After breakfast, she collected the Range Rover keys from the housekeeper, consciously aware of Kieran watching her from his study doorway as she left. His trust extended only as far as his surveillance, she knew. The moment she deviated from her stated destination, he would discover it. She had perhaps 3 hours before suspicions would be raised. Instead of heading toward the cemetery where her mother was buried, Ariel drove into Manhattan, constantly checking her mirrors for signs of being followed. The address Valencia had provided was in a nondescript building in the meatpacking district, the kind of place that housed tech startups and creative agencies. She parked 2 blocks away and walked the remaining distance, scanning the street for familiar faces before entering the building. No security guard manned the lobby, just a simple directory and an elevator. According to Valencia's instructions, she needed the 5th floor, suite 503. The elevator doors opened to reveal a minimalist reception area with frosted glass walls bearing only a stylized logo, a digital fox silhouette with the words, "Red Fox Digital Security," beneath it. "Mrs. Thorne." Valencia emerged from behind the glass doors, dressed in sleek business attire rather than yesterday's casual disguise. "Thank you for coming. Follow me, please." She led Ariel through the office space where several people worked at computer stations, their screens filled with code and security protocols. At the back of the space, a private conference room awaited, its windows frosted for privacy. "Welcome to Red Fox," Valencia said as she closed the door behind them. "My company, though I keep my ownership quiet for obvious reasons." "Your company?" Ariel was genuinely surprised. I thought you were a journalist. I am. The best cover for a digital security specialist is a profession that already gives you reason to ask intrusive questions. Valencia's smile was razor sharp. Now, the locket. Ariel hesitated only briefly before unclasping the gold pendant from her neck and handing it over. Valencia handled it with reverence, carefully opening the hidden compartment to extract the tiny data chip. Impressive, she murmured. Old school but effective. Modern encryption tends to leave digital footprints. Physical storage can be more secure if properly hidden. A soft knock interrupted them, and Valencia called for the person to enter. A young man with wire-rimmed glasses and rumpled clothing appeared, his expression serious despite his youth. Mrs. Thorne, this is Felix, our head of data recovery. He'll extract whatever information is on this chip. Felix nodded a greeting, taking the chip with careful fingers. This might take some time, depending on encryption levels and data formats. Can I offer you coffee while you wait? Please, Ariel agreed, checking her watch anxiously. Though I only have about 2 hours before I need to return to Westchester. Felix disappeared with the chip, leaving Ariel alone with Valencia. While we wait, tell me about the locked room, Valencia said, leaning forward intently. You mentioned Kieran and Winters discussing special items being authenticated? Yes. They seemed significant, perhaps connected to whatever was stolen from Kieran's grandfather. Ariel described the biometric lock she'd discovered, the conversation she'd overheard. I'm certain whatever is in that room is central to his obsession with the Fontaine legacy. We need to know what's in there. Valencia tapped her fingernails against the table thoughtfully. Any chance you could access it? The lock requires Kieran's fingerprint and retinal scan. I've tried using my own clearance on other secure rooms in the house, but this one is different. More sophisticated. Interesting that he would need such extreme security inside his own home, Valencia mused. Especially since he believes you're completely under his control. Before Ariel could respond, Felix returned with coffee and an update. The chip has multiple layers of encryption, but I've broken through the first level. It contains research notes, pharmaceutical formulas, financial records, and personal journals dating back to the 1960s. All digitized from original documents. My grandmother's records, Ariel breathed. Can you access them? Working on it, Felix replied. The personal journals have lighter encryption. We should have access to those within the hour. The scientific data is more heavily protected. The journals first, Valencia instructed. We need to understand the personal history before we tackle the scientific implications. The next 40 minutes passed in tense anticipation as Felix worked on breaking the encryption. Ariel sipped her coffee and tried to organize her thoughts, preparing for whatever revelations awaited. We're in, Felix announced finally, returning with a tablet. The journals span from 1964 to 1979, written by Elise Fontaine before and after her disappearance. I've loaded them in chronological order. The tablet screen displayed neat handwriting, digitized from original journal pages. Ariel's fingers trembled slightly as she began to read her grandmother's words. May 15, 1964, Richard's behavior has become increasingly concerning. The military representatives visited the lab again today. He assured me they were only interested in medical applications, but I saw the classified documents on his desk. Weaponization protocols. What have we stumbled into? June 3, 1964, confronted Richard about the military contracts. He claimed I was being naive, that the real money and prestige come from defense applications. When I threatened to report his unauthorized research directions to the University Ethics Board, he became frightening. No one would believe you over me, he said. I no longer recognize my research partner in this power-hungry stranger, August 17, 1964, Richard has locked me out of the primary lab. Claims it's for my protection while the military representatives conduct tests. I've begun duplicating our research notes and storing them off-site. Something is very wrong. I fear what he's planning to do with our discoveries, asterisk. The journal entries continued, chronicling the deterioration of the research partnership and Elisa's growing fear of Richard Thorne. Then came the entry that changed everything. November 2, 1964, I found the testing reports. Our compound C-117, designed to regenerate damaged neural tissue, has been modified to target and destroy specific brain functions. They're creating a programmable neurological weapon under the guise of medical research. I confronted Richard, told him I would expose everything. He laughed and said no one would ever hear my accusations. Accidents happen in laboratories all the time, he told me. I've never seen such cold calculation in a human face before. I must act quickly, asterisk. Ariel looked up from the tablet, stunned. He threatened to kill her for exposing his weapons research. Keep reading, Valencia urged. The next part is crucial. November 10, 1964, the plan is set. Dar. Mercer will help stage my death during childbirth next month. My daughter will officially be recorded as stillborn, though she will leave the hospital with me under our new identities. I've secured new papers, a new life far from Richard's reach. The research, the legitimate medical applications, will continue under trusted colleagues. Richard can have his weapons. I will save lives, asterisk. December 18, 1964, Vivian is beautiful. Perfect. She will never know the danger we escaped, the legacy of fear that forced us into hiding. Richard believes us both dead. It must remain that way. I've established the trust with ironclad provisions. The Fontaine assets will remain protected, accessible only to my direct descendants, and only after my death and Vivian's. Richard Thorne will never touch what we've built from our legitimate research, asterisk. Subsequent entries detailed Elisa's new life, the growth of Fontaine Pharmaceuticals under her remote guidance, and her eventual terminal illness when Vivian was in her 20s. The final entry, dated just days before her actual death, contained a warning. March 3, 1979, I've told Vivian everything. The truth about her father, about Richard Thorne, about the company and the fortune I've built. She wants nothing to do with any of it. Insists on living a normal life, away from wealth and corporate power struggles. I've respected her wishes but established the trust to protect her and any children she might have. The Thornes are patient and vindictive. Abram still searches for our research, and his son shows the same obsessive tendencies. I fear they will never stop hunting for what they believe was stolen from them. The evidence of Richard's crimes is secured, both in physical documents and now digitally. Vivian knows where to find it if needed. May she never need it, asterisk. Ariel set down the tablet, her mind reeling. So my grandmother didn't steal research. She rescued it from being weaponized. Exactly. Valencia's expression was grim. And Kieran has spent his life believing the opposite, that your grandmother stole his grandfather's work and destroyed his legacy. But that's not true. The journals prove it. Journals can be fabricated, Felix interjected, looking up from his computer. We need the scientific data and whatever evidence she collected of Richard's weapons program. How much longer on the encryption? Valencia asked. Felix grimaced. Several more hours at least. The scientific data has military-grade protection. We don't have hours, Ariel said, checking her watch anxiously. I need to be back within the hour, or Kieran will know something's wrong. Take the tablet, Valencia decided. The journals are enough to give you context. We'll continue working on the scientific data and send whatever we find securely. And the chip? We'll make copies and return the original to you tomorrow. The locket should remain empty for now, in case Kieran becomes suspicious. Ariel nodded, reluctantly handing the locket back to Felix for safekeeping. What about the locked room? What do you think Kieran is keeping there? Based on these journals, I'd guess it contains the original research notebooks and any physical evidence Elise collected about Richard's weapons program. Valencia's expression turned serious. The special items Winters mentioned being authenticated are probably those original documents. If Kieran gets them authenticated and then destroys them, he erases the evidence of his grandfather's crimes, Ariel finished. And rewrites history to match his version of events. Exactly. Which means we need to access that room before he can complete his plan. How? The security is impenetrable without Kieran's biometrics. Valencia smiled, the expression predatory. No security is truly impenetrable. We just need the right approach. She turned to Felix. Send Nadia to the Thorne estate today. Utility company inspection cover. Felix nodded and left to make the arrangements. What are you planning? Ariel asked. Nadia will pose as a utility inspector, plant a device near the security system. It won't break the biometric requirements, but it will create a record of every access. When Kieran next opens that room, we'll know exactly what security protocols were used. And then what? Then we find a way to replicate them. Valencia checked her watch. You should go. Return to the cemetery first, spend at least 20 minutes there. Your car's GPS is almost certainly being monitored. Ariel gathered her purse, tucking the tablet securely inside. Thank you. For everything. This isn't just about helping you, Ariel. Valencia's expression turned distant. Kieran Thorne has destroyed many lives in his quest to reclaim what he believes is his birthright. It's time someone stopped him. The drive back to Westchester included the recommended detour to the cemetery, where Ariel spent a genuine 20 minutes at her mother's grave. The simple headstone bore only Vivian's name, teaching dates, and the epitaph, her greatest lessons were of love. Nothing to suggest her connection to a pharmaceutical empire, no hint of her hidden past. You should have told me, Ariel whispered, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone. I might have been prepared for what Kieran really wanted. But even as she said the words, she understood her mother's choices. Vivian had rejected the fortune and the corporate legacy, choosing instead a simple life focused on education and family. She had protected her daughters from the Thorne vendetta by keeping them ignorant of their heritage. Until her illness had forced her hand, revealing at least part of the truth to Ariel through the locket and its hidden contents. Back at the mansion, Ariel found Kieran in his study, reviewing documents with his typical focused intensity. How was your visit? He asked without looking up. Emotional but necessary. Ariel infused her voice with genuine feeling, not difficult given the complicated emotions she actually felt. I needed that closure. Kieran finally glanced up, studying her tear-stained face with clinical interest. Good. The Nakamura representatives will be here in 30 minutes. Change into something appropriate for lunch, would you? Of course. Ariel turned to leave, then hesitated. Kieran. What happens after all this is finalized? After the Fontaine assets are fully integrated into Thorne Quantum? Life continues. His voice was dispassionate. The company expands globally. We maintain our public roles. Nothing fundamentally changes. And us? Our marriage? Something flickered across his features, almost like regret. Our arrangement continues as established. You'll want for nothing material. But not love, Ariel said softly. Not genuine partnership. Kieran set down his pen, giving her his full attention for perhaps the first time in days. Love is an illusion people create to give meaning to biological imperatives. Partnership exists where interests align. Our interests align in maintaining appearances and social position. And if I wanted more than that? Then you'd be disappointed. His bluntness was almost refreshing after months of manipulation. I'm capable of many things, Ariel, but emotional authenticity isn't among them. I thought you understood that when you agreed to marry me. I understood I was marrying a complex man with trust issues. Not a sociopath who targeted me for my genetic connection to a fortune I didn't know existed. Kieran actually smiled at that, a cold expression devoid of humor. Such dramatic language. I targeted you because you fit specific parameters necessary for my objectives. You accepted because I offered security, status, and the resources to care for your mother and sister. We both got what we wanted. Except I believed there was more to it than that. I believed you loved me. A convenient fiction we both maintained. Kieran returned his attention to his documents. Now, please change for lunch. The Blue McQueen would be appropriate. Dismissed like a servant, Ariel retreated upstairs, her mind working furiously. The Nakamura lunch would keep Kieran occupied for several hours. Perhaps this was her opportunity to investigate the locked room, especially if Valencia's operative managed to plant the monitoring device. In her dressing room, she changed quickly into the suggested designer dress, her thoughts on the tablet hidden in her purse. She needed to read more of her grandmother's journals, understand the full scope of what she was dealing with. But first, the lunch presentation, another performance in the ongoing charade of her marriage. The afternoon unfolded according to Kieran's careful orchestration. Ariel played the perfect corporate wife, elegant, attentive, but appropriately deferential. She smiled at the right moments, contributed gracefully to conversations when addressed, and otherwise remained decorative and unobtrusive. The Japanese businessmen seemed impressed by the performance, occasionally directing appreciative glances her way. One even commented to Kieran, "Your wife is most accomplished. Beauty and intelligence combined." "I'm fortunate," Kieran replied, his proprietary hand resting briefly on Ariel's shoulder. Ariel understands her role perfectly. The double meaning wasn't lost on her. Her role was to be whatever Kieran required for his business and social objectives. Nothing more, nothing less. As the lunch concluded and Kieran escorted their guests to waiting cars, Ariel slipped away to the guest bedroom where she'd hidden the tablet. With the door locked behind her, she continued reading her grandmother's journals, searching for additional insights. The entries from the 1970s proved particularly illuminating. Elise had documented Richard Thorne's decline into obsession and paranoia, his company's failed attempts to recreate the research she'd protected, and his eventual death under mysterious circumstances. July 17, 1978, news has reached me about Richard's death. The official report claims heart failure, but my sources indicate he was found in his private laboratory, surrounded by failed experiments. Abram has taken control of the company now. He seems less unstable than his father, but no less determined to claim what he believes is his birthright. The vendetta continues through the next generation, *. Elise had been right. The vendetta had continued, passing from Richard to Abram, and finally to Kieran. 3 generations of Thorne men obsessed with reclaiming what they believed had been stolen from them. But unlike his father and grandfather, Kieran had found a more elegant solution: marriage to a Fontaine heir. A soft knock at the door startled Ariel from her reading. She quickly hid the tablet under a pillow before opening the door to find a uniformed woman holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Thorne. Sorry to disturb you. I'm from the utility company, checking the electrical systems. Your housekeeper directed me to inform all residents that power may fluctuate briefly during the inspection." The woman's eyes met Ariel's with subtle meaning, and Ariel immediately understood. This was Nadia, Valencia's operative. "Of course. How long will the inspection take?" "About an hour, ma'am. We're particularly concerned with the East Wing systems. Some unusual power draws have been reported." "I see. Well, don't let me keep you from your work." Nadia nodded almost imperceptibly before continuing down the hallway, clipboard in hand. The message was clear: the monitoring device would be planted near the locked room in the East Wing. Ariel returned to the tablet, reading more frantically now. The final journal entries detailed specific locations of evidence, including a reference that made her heart race. February 18, 1979, the original laboratory notebooks and military contract documents are secured in the Swiss vault, with duplicates hidden at the Massachusetts property in the hidden room behind the library. Access requires the Fontaine medallion and the cipher sequence. Vivian knows the protocol if needed. These must never fall into thorn hands, asterisk. The Massachusetts property. The hidden room behind the library. The medallion and cipher sequence. These details tugged at Ariel's memory, connecting to something her mother had once mentioned about a family vacation home near Cape Cod, sold years ago when Ariel was still a child. But if the property had been sold, what had happened to the hidden documents? Had her mother retrieved them? Or... A terrible thought struck her. What if Kieran had somehow discovered their location? What if the special items being authenticated were those very documents, the evidence of Richard Thorne's crimes? Her suspicions crystallized into certainty. The locked room contained the evidence that would exonerate her grandmother and condemn Kieran's grandfather. Once authenticated to confirm their genuineness, the documents would likely be destroyed, erasing the truth forever. A soft chime from her phone interrupted her thoughts. A text message from an unknown number, device planted. East Wing security accessed at 3:17 p.m. today. Working on solution. Stay alert. Kieran had entered the locked room less than an hour ago, while she was reading in the guest bedroom. What had he been doing in there? Checking on the documents? Communicating with whoever was authenticating them? The sound of footsteps approaching sent Ariel scrambling to hide the tablet again. Seconds later, a knock at the door. Ariel? Are you in there? Kieran's voice. She composed herself quickly, then opened the door. Yes, I was just resting after lunch. Those presentations can be quite draining. Kieran studied her face, his expression unreadable. The Nakamura team was impressed. The contracts have been finalized ahead of schedule. That's wonderful news, Ariel forced enthusiasm into her voice. Should we celebrate? Actually, yes. A rare smile crossed Kieran's face. I've planned a small dinner party tomorrow evening. Just a few key executives and their spouses. The formal completion of the Fontaine acquisition deserves recognition. The Fontaine acquisition. As if her family's legacy were merely another corporate asset to be absorbed. I'll ensure everything is perfect, she promised, already calculating how this event might provide an opportunity to access the locked room. Excellent. Wear the black Valentino. Kieran turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ariel. The utility inspector. Did she come to see you specifically? Ariel's heart skipped, but her expression remained neutral. She was checking the electrical systems throughout the house. The housekeeper sent her to inform everyone about possible power fluctuations. Interesting. We haven't scheduled any utility inspections. Kieran's eyes narrowed slightly. I'll look into it. After he left, Ariel released a shaky breath. Kieran suspected something. She needed to warn Valencia that their operative might have been compromised. She pulled out her burner phone to send a warning text, but before she could type anything, another message arrived from the unknown number, access solution identified. Will deliver tomorrow. Prepare for extraction of evidence and yourself if necessary. Security breach suspected. Extraction. The clinical term sent a shiver through Ariel. This was no longer just about discovering the truth or claiming her inheritance. This was about escaping Kieran's control entirely, potentially fleeing the life she'd built over the past year. Could she do it? Leave everything behind and start over? The mansion had never truly felt like home, and her marriage had been revealed as a sham. But there was Mira to consider, still vulnerable to Kieran's manipulation. And practical concerns, money, shelter, protection from whatever legal countermeasures Kieran would undoubtedly pursue. As these thoughts tumbled through her mind, another text arrived: Fontaine Trust accessible with locket authentication. Funds available immediately once activated. Prepare for tomorrow evening. The pieces were falling into place. The dinner party would provide cover for accessing the locked room. Valencia's team had apparently found a way to bypass the security. And the trust, her grandmother's carefully protected fortune, could be activated using the locket's authentication. For the first time since discovering Kieran's true nature, Ariel felt something like hope. She might actually escape this gilded cage, might reclaim her family's legacy and her own freedom in one decisive move. The next day passed in a blur of preparations. Outwardly, Ariel supervised the dinner arrangements with perfect composure, selecting flowers, approving menus, ensuring the house was immaculate. Inwardly, she was coiled with tension, waiting for Valencia's promised access solution and planning her investigation of the locked room. Kieran remained distantly cordial, absorbed in business calls and preparations for the evening's announcements. If he suspected anything about Ariel's plans, he gave no indication. But she noticed Maurice shadowing her more closely than usual, appearing whenever she ventured near the east wing under the pretense of checking table settings or floral arrangements. At 4 o'clock, a flower delivery arrived, an elaborate arrangement for the dining room centerpiece. The delivery person, a young woman with a pleasant smile, handed Ariel the arrangement and a small envelope. Special instructions for care of the orchids, ma'am, she explained within earshot of the hovering housekeeper. In the privacy of the powder room, Ariel opened the envelope to find a thumb-sized device resembling a decorative button and brief instructions: place against lock panel. Will override biometrics for 30 seconds. Single use only. Dinner party provides optimal cover at 9:15 p.m. when speeches begin. She tucked the device into her bra, the safest hiding place she could think of, and returned to her preparations. By 7 o'clock, the first guests were arriving, and Ariel stood beside Kieran in the foyer, the perfect hostess receiving congratulations on her husband's latest business triumph. The Fontaine acquisition is a masterstroke, gushed one executive's wife, oblivious to the irony of complimenting Ariel on her own family's company being absorbed. Kieran must be thrilled to finally unite the companies after all these years. It's been his dream, Ariel agreed, her smile fixed in place. A true passion project. The evening proceeded according to plan. Dinner was served precisely at 8, the conversation flowing around corporate strategies and market projections. Ariel participated minimally, her attention focused on the ornate clock above the mantel, watching the minutes tick toward 9:15. At 9, Kieran stood to begin his formal remarks, champagne flute in hand. Before dessert, I'd like to say a few words about today's historic achievement. As he launched into his carefully prepared speech, Ariel excused herself discreetly. Just freshening up, she murmured to the woman beside her. I'll be right back. The east wing corridor was dimly lit and deserted, the sounds of the dinner party fading as Ariel moved quickly toward the locked room. Her heart hammered in her chest as she approached the sophisticated security panel beside the door. With trembling fingers, she removed the device from her dress and pressed it against the panel as instructed. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the panel glowed green, emitting a soft beep as the lock disengaged. 30 seconds. She had 30 seconds to enter and secure the door behind her. The room beyond was smaller than she'd expected, more like a secure vault than a sitting room. Climate-controlled glass cases lined the walls, containing what appeared to be old laboratory notebooks, letters, contracts, and photographs. A central display held a single leather-bound journal, open to a page filled with chemical formulas and annotations. Ariel moved quickly, scanning the displayed items. Her grandmother's name appeared repeatedly, on research notes, on formulas, on correspondence. But most disturbing were the military contracts, clearly visible in one case, bearing Richard Thorne's signature alongside terms for weaponized application of neurological compounds. The evidence was all here, exactly as her grandmother had described in her journals. Proof that Richard Thorne had attempted to weaponize their joint medical research. Proof that Elise Fontaine hadn't stolen anything, but had instead protected their legitimate work from military exploitation. Ariel pulled out her phone and began photographing everything, working methodically around the room. When she reached the central display, she gasped aloud. The open journal belonged not to her grandmother, but to Richard Thorne himself. And the visible page explicitly detailed plans for targeted neurological degradation weapons, using the compounds he and Elise had developed. Find what you're looking for. Ariel whirled around to find Kieran standing in the doorway, his expression coldly furious. In her focus on documenting the evidence, she'd lost track of time. You lied. She lifted her phone, displaying the photograph she'd just taken. Your grandfather was developing chemical weapons. My grandmother didn't steal his research. She protected it. She destroyed his legacy, Kieran countered, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. She took their joint discoveries and built an empire while he died in disgrace. Because he wanted to create weapons that would destroy people's minds. She used the research for its intended purpose, medical treatments that save lives. Kieran moved toward the central display, his expression softening as he gazed at his grandfather's journal. You see weapons. I see visionary applications that would have revolutionized military capability. Precise, targeted, humane compared to conventional weapons. There's nothing humane about destroying people's minds. Ariel backed away, still clutching her phone. Your grandfather was going to violate every ethical principle of medical research. My grandmother stopped him. By stealing his work and faking her own death, Kieran's voice hardened. By ensuring the Thorne name would be associated with failure while Fontaine became synonymous with medical innovation. She had no choice. He threatened to kill her when she opposed his weapons program. Kieran's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? It's in her journals. Ariel held her ground. He threatened her when she discovered the military contracts. Said accidents happen in laboratories all the time. You're lying. My grandfather was many things, but he wasn't a murderer. Read it yourself. Ariel pulled up the journal entries on her phone. Your grandfather was developing neurological weapons for military application. When my grandmother threatened to expose him, he threatened her life. Everything you believe about your family legacy is based on a lie. Kieran took the phone, his expression shifting from anger to confusion as he read the journal entries. For several long moments, the only sound in the room was his breathing, growing more agitated with each swipe of the screen. These could be fabricated, he said finally, but doubt had crept into his voice. They match the evidence in this room. Ariel gestured to the documents surrounding them. Your own grandfather's journal confirms it. You've spent your life avenging a crime that never happened. Kieran set the phone down on the display case, his movements deliberate, controlled despite the emotion in his eyes. Even if these accounts are accurate, it doesn't change the fact that Fontaine Pharmaceuticals was built using Thorne research. My family deserves recognition for those contributions. Recognition, yes. Ownership, no. Ariel moved toward the door. I'll be happy to acknowledge Richard Thorne's contributions to the original research in any historical accounts. But the Fontaine legacy belongs to the Fontaine heirs. Not to you. You're not leaving with those photographs. Kieran's voice turned dangerous. And you're not leaving this marriage with the Fontaine fortune. Actually, she's doing both. The new voice came from the doorway, where Lucien Blackwood now stood, a small device in his hand pointed at the security panel. Step aside, Kieran. Lucien. Kieran's expression twisted with betrayal. What the hell do you think you're doing? The right thing, for once. Lucien moved into the room, positioning himself between Ariel and Kieran. I've suspected for years that your grandfather's version of events wasn't entirely accurate. Now we have proof. So you're betraying me? After everything we've built together? I'm preventing you from destroying evidence and continuing a vendetta based on lies. Lucien nodded to Ariel. Go. Valencia is waiting in the kitchen. The dinner guests believe there's been a minor fire requiring brief evacuation. As Ariel moved toward the door, Kieran lunged forward, grabbing her arm. You're my wife. Everything you have belongs to me. The prenuptial agreement is invalidated by fraud, Lucien interrupted. Marriage under false pretenses, documented evidence of coercion. No court will uphold it once they see the evidence. You planned this, Kieran said, his grip on Ariel's arm tightening painfully. Both of you, conspiring behind my back. Let her go, Kieran, Lucien's voice hardened. You've lost. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left. For a moment, Ariel thought Kieran might actually strike Lucien. Then, surprisingly, he released her arm and stepped back, his expression closing into the cold mask she knew so well. Take your photographs and your journals, he said, his voice utterly controlled. But this isn't over, Ariel. A thorn never forgets a betrayal. Neither does a Fontaine, she replied, gathering her phone and moving toward the door. Goodbye, Kieran. In the kitchen, Valencia waited with Mira, both women looking tense but determined. We need to move, Valencia said without preamble. The security system will reset in 3 minutes. Mira, what are you doing here? Ariel embraced her sister tightly. Valencia explained everything. Myra's expression was a mixture of confusion and resolve. About our grandmother, the Fontaine Trust, what Kieran was really after. I couldn't let you face this alone. The car's waiting, Valencia interrupted. We need to leave now. Lucien can only distract Kieran for so long. Outside, a nondescript sedan idled at the service entrance, Felix at the wheel. As they piled in, Ariel glanced back at the mansion that had been her gilded cage for nearly a year. Lights blazed from every window, the dinner guests milling on the front lawn in confusion, staff running to assure them that fire was under control. What happens now? Ariel asked as the car pulled away from the estate. Now we activate the Fontaine Trust using the authentication in your locket, Valencia explained. Felix has already prepared the digital verification. Once activated, you'll have access to the funds and control of Fontaine Pharmaceuticals, which remains separate from Thorn Quantum despite Kieran's announcements tonight. And Kieran? Will face some uncomfortable questions about document authentication and potential fraud charges. Valencia's smile was grim. Lucien has agreed to provide evidence about Kieran's plans to destroy the historical record once the authentication was complete. Lucien, Ariel repeated, still processing his unexpected intervention. Why would he betray Kieran after all these years? Valencia and Felix exchanged a significant look. That's a question for him to answer, Valencia said finally. But let's just say his connection to this situation is more personal than professional. As the car sped toward Manhattan and an uncertain future, Ariel held her sister's hand tightly. The locket that had started this journey was back in her possession, returned by Felix earlier that day. Its weight against her skin felt different now, a connection to a grandmother she'd never known but whose courage had preserved a legacy she would now inherit. Are you okay? Mira asked softly. This is a lot to process all at once. I'm not sure, Ariel admitted. Finding out our family history was a lie, that we're heirs to a pharmaceutical fortune, that my husband married me to steal that inheritance, it doesn't feel quite real yet. The inheritance isn't what matters, Mira said with the wisdom that had always seemed beyond her years. It's the truth. Grandma Elise stood up for what was right, even when it meant giving up everything she knew. Mom chose a simple life because she valued teaching more than wealth. And you survived a year with a man who saw you as nothing but a means to an end. That's the real Fontaine legacy, Ariel. Not the money. The courage. Ariel squeezed her sister's hand, tears welling in her eyes. When did you get so smart? Must be those Fontaine genes, Mira replied with a small smile. Though I still want to know how we're going to explain all this to my university when the tuition checks start coming from a different source. The simple normality of the question. Amidst all the revelations and drama, broke the tension. Ariel laughed, a genuine sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. One step at a time, she said, looking out at the city lights growing brighter as they approached Manhattan. First we secure our inheritance and make sure Kieran can't touch it. Then we figure out what to do with a pharmaceutical company neither of us is qualified to run. And somewhere in there, I need to get a divorce. And find a new place to live, Mira added. Actually, Valencia interjected, the trust includes several properties. Including the original Fontaine family home in Massachusetts, the one referenced in Elisa's journals. It's been maintained by the trust all these years, waiting for the rightful heirs to claim it. A family home, Ariel murmured, the concept suddenly appealing after a year in Kieran's sterile mansion. Somewhere with history. Real history, not fabricated stories. Somewhere to start over, Mira agreed. Both of us. As the car turned onto a quiet street in Tribeca, approaching the secure building where Valencia had arranged temporary accommodations, Ariel felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The journey ahead would be complicated, filled with legal battles and difficult decisions. Kieran would not surrender easily, despite the evidence against him. But for the first time since her mother's death, Ariel felt something like peace. She had discovered the truth about her family's legacy. She had escaped a marriage built on deception. And most importantly, she had found the courage that seemed to run in Fontaine blood, the determination to stand up for what was right, no matter the personal cost. We're here, Valencia announced as the car stopped before a nondescript building. Safe house first, then tomorrow we begin the legal process of claiming your inheritance. Thank you, Ariel said simply. For everything. Don't thank me yet, Valencia replied, her expression serious. Kieran Thorne is a dangerous enemy. This fight is just beginning. Then it's a good thing I'm a Fontaine, Ariel said, stepping out of the car with newfound confidence. Apparently, we don't back down from a fight. As she entered the building with Mira beside her, the locket warm against her skin, Ariel felt her grandmother's presence like a guiding hand. Elise Fontaine had sacrificed everything to protect her research and her daughter. Vivian had chosen a life of meaning over wealth and privilege. Now it was Ariel's turn to honor that legacy, to use the unexpected inheritance not just for personal security, but to continue the work her grandmother had begun. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever battles Kieran might still wage, she would face them with the truth as her shield and her family's courage as her strength. The Fontaine legacy was finally in the hands of its rightful heir. And she intended to make her grandmother proud. Would you have the courage to walk away from wealth and security to reclaim your true identity? How far would you go to discover the truth about your family's past? Share your thoughts in the comments below.